Welcome back. Here to do another border collie video. I was trying to figure out to use a different screen and I couldn't get the integrated camera to work. Still not working. Alright, we'll just leave that up there. Okay, thought I'd do another video on specifically on pups. I've done one on training and on breeding puppies, but on raising pups, starting pups, that kind of thing. There are a lot of different ways you can raise them, train them, obviously. So, I'm going to talk about what I have learned over the years from raising pups and what I think is the best way to go about starting them. I will say in general that it's my view that oftentimes pups are started too early. And there's a financial reason for this. People want to train them and sell them, which I can understand. But it's been my experience that pups really aren't ready for serious training. And again, it depends on the dog, but certainly not much before a year old. You can get them out and start seeing if they're interested in sheep, let them go around the sheep. But I haven't had any that would really just take a lot of pressure. I've had many that were very natural and would do the things, would flank around them, get them to do an outrun, fetch them, even get them to start driving. But they weren't, even those that did those things, they weren't mature enough to take the pressure that is required to really train the dog, the pressure from you. Some of them may have the natural instinct to control the sheep, so they'll take the pressure from the sheep. But when you combine you giving the dog commands and controlling the dog a lot, that's where the problem comes in. So my preferred way to do it is to wait certainly until they're physically capable of getting around the sheep, outrunning the sheep easily, and physically strong enough to defend themselves from the sheep if they need to. If they're not mentally willing to do so, if they're not mentally willing to stand up to the sheep, then you don't, even though they may be physically able to, then it's not a good idea to start working them a lot at that point either. Now, before I start taking a dog to the sheep, I used to do a lot with them. I'd have them with the come here, some kind of stop, a lie down command, and And again, over the years, I've gotten away from that, and I've gone to the opposite now, where basically I don't do hardly anything with them. They should have a here. I can tell them here, come here, and they come to me. I will have them lead broken usually. But I don't have a lie down on them. I don't have a lot of other commands on them because I want them when they get in on the sheep. Even if I'm talking, I still want them thinking about the sheep, not about me too much. And it depends on the dog. Most border collies are going to be cognizant of you and work around you. They want to bring the sheep to you, that sort of thing. So you don't need a lot of concentration on you as the handler, has been my experience. Now some dogs, they're just going to go and start running and chasing all over, and then you got to be able to get the dog and make him stop. That dog's not ready to train yet. It may be that you're going to have to. The dog is just so keen and cannot control itself that you're going to have to get some discipline on that dog before you just let him go with the sheep, even with you in there. But again, I haven't seen that be. I probably really only ever have one dog like that, and I never could get him to settle down enough. Even after I got him to be aware of me and cognizant of me and trying to work off me, he was still just too, just all over the place. May have settled down after years and years, I don't know. I gave him till he was 2 and he didn't settle down, and I moved him along. But the dog needs to be physically mature enough and mentally mature enough. Now, it's been the way it has worked out for me over the last few years. Yeah, I mentioned this with Hank. I tend to train them in kind of spurts. If they're ready to start, let's say around 10 months to a year, 14 months, somewhere in there, I'll get them in there and let them start going around the sheep and teach them their sides, their flanks. Come by. It's the clockwise movement, away to me is the counterclockwise movement. And then I'm usually going to stop at that point. Now, if the dog's wanting to do a lot more, then maybe I would, but it's been my experience that you teach them their sides. Obviously, they should be fetching the sheep to you while doing that. And if they're bringing the sheep to you, you might step aside and let them try to push the sheep past and drive just a little bit, kind of that way. That's all I want to do at that point. I don't want to do a whole lot real fast because, again, it's been my experience that even though the dog may seem to be taking it really, really well and it's doing it and it wants to do more, you're better off not risking overloading the dog and waiting after you've got it on its sides and all, and stepping back and just let the dog work. Get in there with the dog, let him work. You can start then getting the stop and the stand command on them, by which I don't really want them to stop a lot. I want them to slow down and work the sheep more evenly. So after I've got the sides on them, they should already be working fairly even by then anyhow. But instead of just going right into driving and doing other things, what I'll do is I'll let them work off me, get more confidence, and slowly move them along. The dog, I'll know when the dog is ready for the next level of training, which would include driving at that point and lengthening the outrun, although, again, I'm not real big on that outrun business. Because the dog will have good control over the sheep on the fetch while flanking as well, and will want to be able to move those sheep in different directions. He's got to want to do it. If he's not wanting to do it, he's not ready to do it. You say, well, what if he doesn't ever want to do it? Then he's no good. But he needs to want to move those sheep around to different spots. That's when you can start teaching him to drive. He's got to have control of the sheep. He's got to be able to control them with his flanks, fetching them and holding them together good. And then he wants to move them somewhere. That's when you teach him to drive. If he's not wanting to do that, then he's not ready to start driving. And again, I'm not interested in, this is contrary, I guess, to a lot of the way trial training is done. I'm not interested in getting them, okay, I got their flanks on them, let's start lengthening his outrun, let's lengthen his outrun. I don't care about his outrun. He's going to have an outrun. All this stuff on there. Again, if you got a border collie that can't do an outrun, I mean, that's just innate in them. They can do it. Now, that doesn't mean they're doing it real well, but they're going out around the sheep. That's what an outrun is. And I don't even bother to train an outrun per se. It just comes naturally with time, with training. But as I said, when they start wanting to go around and hold them and bring them, and they hold them together, and that's when you're ready to start getting them to move on the drive. And it's been my experience that doesn't come until they've been allowed to work on their more, and I wouldn't say on their own, but without you commanding them a lot for several months. So you might put your flanks on them in the first month to 6 weeks of serious training and kind of wait and see where they're going. And then when they start getting ready to push them off, then you do the driving, and you just do little short stints. You walking along there beside the dog and kind of. I don't stop the dog when I'm doing that. You stop if the dog starts to go to the head. You stop him. I call the dog back to me. I just say here. If I am, we're walking along. He's got to have control of the sheep at that point. He can't be going 90 miles an hour. We're walking along, just like on a fetch, but we're shifting over to a drive now, and he or she wants to run to the head. I call him here, and bring him back to me while we're still moving, while we're still driving along. That seems to be the most effective way that I've come up with. Just here. And then as you get them going like that, you let them go a little bit further without you walking beside them until you just lengthen it up till pretty soon they're out to 20 or 30 yards. Then, you kind of set yourself up where the dog can see you. Brent Swindoll told me about this. It was like you drive them kind of a diamond pattern where the dog's looking at you, is able to see you out of the corner of its eye, and yet it's doing the sheep. You're kind of standing in the middle, and then you just go around in a diamond pattern. And again, if the dog should want to naturally flank out, if it's a dog that wants to run to the head, it'll flank out opposite of you. You just call it in, here, here, and then keep driving, walk, walk, walk. And then when you get to the point where you want the sheep to turn, just let him go ahead and start flanking over there until he gets some kind of turn. And here, 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 call him back in again. That's my preferred way for teaching them to drive. The here command, by the way, is probably, that's what I'm going to use when I want to start singling, shedding. You're going to kind of hold the sheep, single one off, shed one off, call the dog into you. Here, that'll do. Come here. And bring them in, and then by the direction and turn of your body movement, you will tell the dog, which sheep he's supposed to go on to at that point. So that's the command I use. The here a lot more than the stop, the stand, the lie down. The dog should be able to sense that balance point and able to know when you're moving around to sort the sheep, he can tell something's going on. Okay, we're getting ready to do something. And he should naturally stop there and balance off. If he doesn't, then you've got a problem. You need to go back to work, and at that point, instead of putting a stop on the dog, what you need to do is you need to go back to working the balance with the dog, like you were doing at the very beginning when you're letting the dog go around the other side and balance the sheep to you. If he won't hold the balance, then he didn't learn balance properly, or he doesn't have it properly. And that's what you got to do at that point. You don't have to put a stop on the dog. You got to teach that dog to balance. Most border collies want to balance, so that's not a real big issue. It can be, but usually it's not that big of an issue. It never has been for me. So that's kind of the way I like to start them. Start them off slowly. So like I said, you kind of go in those spurts. You go along a month or two, and then you let them kind of ease up for another month or two. Then you start to drive, and that'll take another month or two. Then you ease up. Then you come back after that, and you lengthen out the driving where you're standing at whatever spot you want. And you're having the dog drive them. And then once they can do that, then you can start worrying about shedding, singling, holding sheep in a corner somewhere, that kind of thing. And that would also be when I would be practicing the outrun to the extent that I practice it. To drive the sheep off to somewhere, call the dog back to me, that'll do, come back, and then let him run out and get him again. And that's how, you get the dog where he knows that it's okay to come to you. He's not necessarily having to stop work each time you recall him. You're going to let him go back and get the sheep some of the time. And that makes him more willing to come back to you and break off the sheep. By the way, I don't want him breaking off the sheep without me telling him, obviously. I don't want him looking back at me if I can avoid it. It's hard to do sometimes. But I want his direct attention focused and directed to the sheep. So that's my thoughts on working pups. And I understand that if you are trying to get them trained in a certain amount of time so you can sell them, or you're training them for somebody, you don't have those intervals. You don't want to stop for a couple of months and let the dog mature, because you want, time's money. You want it to go. But I'm not training them as an exercise for me to make money. I'm training them to try to get them to be the best that they can be. I may end up wanting to sell them eventually, some point along the way, but it's not a deal where I want them trained as quick as possible. I'm not interested in having the dog fully trained before he's 2.5, 3 years old. If you can do it and everything works out, wonderful. I haven't been able to do that. And it's been my experience. You're better off waiting and allowing the dog to mature and slowly develop those things that go in with all the different phases, the driving, the shedding, outrunning, all that stuff. Instead of trying to do that real quick, all within just a couple of months, you're better off waiting. Even if the dog was able to handle it very early on, you're not hurting anything by not training that dog real fast. He's not going to fall to pieces, or he shouldn't fall to pieces between being 12 months old and 24 months old. If he does, then he had a problem in the first place. Um, but you need to know that from 1 to 2 years old is a very important time. That's when the dog is developing from basically adolescence to adulthood. They'll be like a young adult at the age of 2. And you need to let that stuff happen slowly and as naturally as possible, as naturally as the dog's abilities will allow. If you're forcing everything constantly, you're more likely to develop problems with the dog. Obviously, some dogs are more natural than others, but I have found that it's better to wait and slowly let them work their way in. And it's not that slow either. I mean, 4 or 5 times out there working on them, they should be getting it and they'll be going along. And it'll depend on the dog and the sheep, obviously, but you don't want to do too much too fast. That's the rule. I would always rather wait and do it a little later than try to force it soon, just for the sake of getting the dog trained early and say, well, I got the dog trained, he's 14 months old. Wonderful. You know, if you can do it, fine, but I haven't been able to do it that quickly without doing damage to the dog. So that's all I got for that. I will see you in the next video.